Welcome, everyone, to the C-Suite Sales and Marketing Perspectives podcast. I'm Steve McDonald, your host. And today we've got a very special guest, Sid Singh. Now, Sid, you're the CRO at Intangles. And what I'd love to do is have you explain a little bit more about what you're doing there. But what's interesting is you've spent your entire career working in mid-size and up companies for CEOs who are also founders. And that's really important to you in how you operate your team as entrepreneurs on behalf of not only the company, but your customers. They're putting their faith in you to help them grow their business. And I love that perspective. You've been in a SaaS company, but you've got an MBA in HR. And so you have a really interesting focus on people internally and externally in terms of understanding the customer and bringing that depth to the entire sales process. So I'd love to have you, if you don't mind, expand a little bit more on that before we dig in, because we're going to talk about your perspective on the new skills that modern salespeople need to master to be successful today.
Well, I'll first thank you so much, by the way, for inviting me for this podcast. I always love to distribute gyan, and this gives me a free podium to spread out all the stuff that's sitting in the hardware. But quick note about Intangles. We are an Indian multinational company, which is in the business of creating digital twins of class 4 and above heavy vehicles in the commercial and non-commercial spaces. By the virtue of creating a digital twin using our proprietary hardware, we are able to ensure that the data which goes to the cloud by the virtue of this very realistic digital twin model is worked upon by some very, very well trained proprietary patented algorithms, which gives our customers something traditional telematics never gave, which is the power to preempt failures by observing suboptimal vehicle behavior in the most critical parts of the vehicle's CPU, which is the engine. Whether the battery is suboptimal or the boost pressure is suboptimal, we are able to preempt the check engine light, which means the vehicle has broken down problem for a customer, sometimes by hours, sometimes by days. I'll leave it at that. 11-year-old company, over 500,000 assets globally on the platform, sit on AWS, US, Canada, Mexico, and North America is where we started operations 3 years back. I joined 2.5, 3 years back to add scale and velocity to the post Series A motion. And we were able to validate the early settings in the ecosystem in North America to take Series B funding last year. Great investors, you can read all that on the website. Coming to the second question. When I started my career, my now wife, then batchmate at my B school, would always tell me, Sid, you have the gift of gab. You should be doing an MBA in sales and marketing, more marketing than anything else. And I said, I'm doing HR. And in those days, HR in India was something that mostly women would do because it's administrative and men would go for a more glamorous financial sales and marketing ecosystem. But I chose to do HR because I always wanted to understand what human behind human resources needs. And I thought that would give me the most valuable impetus to work with people. Because human resources is not the gamut of an human resource manager. Everybody can be an HR manager because you manage people. So started with that hypothesis, became a recruiter because I always wanted to sell. And these are the days when there was no social media, mobile phones were still those old Nokia phones. So somebody who was my first CEO and co-founder, very interesting story. If you may allow me to double click, I'll tell you the story. I walk into this multi-story building. I enter the elevator, and there is this pot-bellied man in his mid-30s, early 40s, wearing the tag of the company I was going to interview in. And in India, you have a lift man in the elevator. So I asked the lift man, hey, I'm going to this company for an interview. How's the company? And the lift man is like, yeah, it's good. And he was talking in the vernacular language in India. And then I turn, I see this guy with the tag of the same company. So I was like, hey, you work for this company? And he's like, yes, I work for the company. Hey, I'm going to interview as an intern. How is the company? I have other job offers in hand, but I would want to know your perspective. And this man is grumpy. It's good. It's good. Then I go up, I finish my 4, 5 rounds, test, psychometric evaluation. And right at the end of the day, they tell me that you got to go and meet the CEO. So we open the door and this man turns around. He's like, ha, 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 I am the CEO of the company. So I was like, what just happened? We ended up talking. And that's when I realized, Steve, that my propensity to connect with people and leverage on a very inherent natural skill set of humor will take me a long way in my career. And I joined that company just because the guy was the founder CEO and he was from my school in New Delhi. Hit out extremely well and career went from here to there. But I started learning a very important facet in life, which is if you work with the co-founder or founder CEO, that's an MBA that is not given in Ivy League colleges. That MBA stands for mind blowing attitude. That has stood me in good stead over the last 21 years. I very proudly tell my son and all my folks that I have picked up the spirit of doing somebody's business as the owner of the business without the risk of investing in the business from my pocket. It has tremendous downs, it has glorious ups, but you got to understand that the founder CEO wakes up on this side of the bed with a thought today, wakes up on that side of the bed with a thought tomorrow. So you learn dynamism, you learn how to delve in uncertainty, you are learning money making, you are learning how to handle mistakes, you're learning fears, you're learning uncertainties, you're learning vulnerabilities, so many things that help you grow as a professional. The functional side of your role, whether it's sales, marketing, recruiting, finance, those are skills you pick up down the line. I'll take a pause. Does that give you a fair semblance of how what started and where I have kind of navigated to as of now?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I have to tell you, as a two-time SaaS founder myself, I know the entrepreneurial mindset is that you never stop thinking about the customer. You never stop thinking about how you can do something better to help serve them. You know that they are your North Star. I love that mindset that you bring into this. And I just wanted to ask you just to get us kicked off here. You talk a lot about asking better questions. And I think that ties directly to what you were saying there. That entrepreneurial mindset has a curiosity that is insatiable. How does that mindset and the idea of asking better questions fuel growth in a company and constant customer discovery?
So ask the right questions is the first stuff you learn as a budding sales guy, right? But asking the questions without actively listening to what the customer is saying, you dig your own grave after that. And most sales guys, and even leaders for that matter, they believe that by asking situation questions and problem questions, what is the size of the business? What is the head count? Tell me what your problem is. They have done their bit of discovery. But very early in my career, somebody taught me the art of spin selling, which is asking situation questions, problem identification questions, implication questions, and then need provoking questions. Now you start with the 5W1H. You start with what, when, where, and by the time you reach need provoking, you start asking how questions. Now the skill to work on is how fast, in how much time, and in how many iterations or meetings do you go from situation questions to need provoking questions. And that can only be answered if you don't cage your prospect or customer with situation problem questions. Kind of the customer knows the problem, but he will never tell you what his problem is. So you got to start jumping from what, when, who, to why, and how very fast. Now, this is the elementary basis of any discovery exercise. That's what a doctor does when he's diagnosing. Over the years, you have techniques like BANT, and then nowadays MedPick is going around the circles. They're all great, organized frameworks for discovery, essentially pushing the sales guy to leverage on the skill of asking the 5W1H questions and spinning them at the right trajectory and velocity to ensure you get the information that you want. So you can ask yourself a question: have I understood the problem? More importantly, have I understood the implication of that problem on the customer's business? And only then can a need be drafted as a problem statement.
So, the idea of asking these questions and asking them and getting to the why, the how faster. So, I've been talking to a lot of CROs, and this one gentleman, he said, Steve, in today's day and age, it's harder to get the meetings. The time between meetings is longer. The time that we have with them, our prospects and buyers, is shorter when we actually do have the meeting. So we've got to really make use of that time more than we ever have before. Are you feeling that as well? How does that change the dynamics of the arc and how you're asking these questions and making use of that time?
That's a fantastic question. See, what has happened in today's world is customers had Google, now they have ChatGPT, Perplexity, Cloud. The amount of time a customer used to invest in getting to know you in the early part of those meetings
Yeah.
is zilch straight because they can get everything from their computer, right? You ask ChatGPT to give you a SWOT analysis of the guy coming to meet me. And customers by today, they know what they want. They just want to know if the vendor can work in my, I'll stick to my enterprise SaaS world, whether the company is stable, whether the product kind of fits into my overall enterprise architecture, what are the security ramifications. They also will know kind of the ballpark costs the SaaS companies operating at. So the customer getting to know you is something that they don't have the time for because they already think they know you. You have to go in there, present yourself in a quick jiffy 30-second, 60-second elevator pitch of who you are, what you do, and get into the art of slicing and dicing why the customer's 30 minute can be utilized better. And that is when preparation becomes very important. So you're already going with an understanding of where the customer's business is headed. Taking a pause there and explain this with an example. In my business, I sell a lot of trucking companies. Given that the war is going on, fuel prices are at all-time high. Tariffs have impacted cross-border movement of trucks across Mexico and the US. The revenue per mile, the final metric for any trucking company, is at an all-time low. They are surviving, struggling to find loads for their trucks. It starts from there. If you can circumnavigate and understand that a long haul truck or an auto lifter, what kind of revenue per mile is he operating at? And based on that, what could be his problem? Is the problem looking like this truck? Because it's an auto hauler, logic tells me that it will up and down the forklift every time the cars have to be loaded and brought down. That will have a draining impact on the battery. So you kind of assess the need and funnel the need assessment cycle into a bucket to start probing the customer as to whether those are the first few elementary problem areas. So you have taken it apart by the virtue of being closer to his business. By this demonstrated line of questioning, you have already built his interest that the guy knows my industry and my business. And then the art of jumping into his problem statement at that point of time becomes a much faster exercise. So again, taking it back, that's why metric is very important. It gives you a framework as to how to prepare before a meeting very well. So you are heading into a meeting with the perspective that I will not waste my time on situation problem questions. That is searchable, that is digestible. I will get into implication and need provoking questions very, very fast.
You know, it's interesting. The conversations I've been having with CROs is this, you brought it up, right? They can research you, you can research them on AI. So everybody has a lot more information from each side. Living in the world today that we have, where products are less differentiated, technology is less differentiated. I mean, ChatGPT, Gemini, they're all writing code. Product differentiation isn't what it used to be. And so I asked him, I said, how do you train your sales team? What's the competitive advantage? And he answered exactly what you did, which is if I go in there and I prove that I know more about their business, then I have a leg up. The key question is, how do you get that information? Because everybody can go to their LLM of choice and get the same information. You and I talked before about the art of knowing more about the customer. And I'm in the middle of a podcast series on the revenue logic of customer obsession. Forrester, a couple of years ago, it's amazing. They did a whole customer obsession study and they found that only less than 3 to 5% of companies are truly customer obsessed. And to do what you're talking about and have that entrepreneurial mindset and that curiosity, that the underlying factor is you're obsessed about the customer. You're obsessed about learning about them and helping them. But that's obviously hard when only 3 to 5% of companies are, let alone then now training entire sales force to be that way and not just go to the LLM of choice and learn like everybody else learns. Everybody can do that. How do you combat that? How do you know and understand deeper than the competitor?
When you and me were young, there were two sources of researching, secondary and primary. In today's world, it's mostly secondary search on your computer, either through search engines or through AI these days. And secondary research and the velocity or pace of assimilating that knowledge that you gather from your research and throwing it out as intelligence is killing sales creativity. I'm using the word sales creativity with a lot of impetus. Creativity is something that is not associated with sales normally. A marketing guy can be creative, or somebody else can be creative. Sales guy, I like bang, 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 hello, make the call, keep the phone down, go to the next one. Creativity results in customer obsession. Obsession and creativity go hand in hand, right? Now, the way we do things today in my organization, and we are extremely customer vocal. We speak the language of the customers because we get deep into their vehicles, understand their vehicles the way they are understanding, and that is the DNA of my company. We encourage the sales guys to use these levers of secondary research by giving them access to Claude, and our Claude is connected to the central hardware. We have the governance security in place. The learning curve of learning what my product is and how does that impact my customer's business is not 15 degrees or 30 degrees because of AI and the tools that I mentioned is 45 degrees. Or the more intelligent creative one, it's 60 degrees. But how do you leverage that secondary research by adding primary research? And that is where going the extra mile comes in. Now, what does primary research mean? Have you spoken with anybody in that business who's not your prospect? Have you spoken with anybody who's a supplier, prospect, distributor, customer of that business to learn more about that business? Which is, have you had airtime talking to at least 4 or 5 people about a prospect before you pick up the phone and call the guy or write an email to him? Now, in the world of sales, that is not doable because the guy has to make 50 calls every day. So you got to stagger it, right? There is the 45 prospects that I have to call today, which are my run of the mill, but here are the five that I'm really passionate about. I know that that will give me the 80-20 sales pipeline coverage that I'm looking at. Now, those five become my Bible. I will engage with them the way I just described. I need to have 50% secondary research, 50% primary research. I sit with my reps and I sometimes tell them, apply for a job in that company. In an interview, even if the recruiter calls, you ask them five, six pertinent questions, you have a perspective. Who are their distributors? Who are their customers? Figure out a creative way to go out there, out of your room, out of your computer, and talk to people to learn about their business. Whether it is reputable, non reputable, making money, not making money, innovative, not innovative, evangelist of technology, not evangelist of technology. That rounded perspective leads into creative outpouring of a messaging that will ensure that the customer sees and perceives you as somebody who is obsessed about that business. It takes some doing because a sales guy also have to understand, Steve, find me a young kid who does an engineering degree or a master's degree and wants to be a sales guy. Everybody wants to be a finance guy or a marketing guy or an HR guy or an analyst or an investment banker. Sales is not the default career that a person has in mind when they pass out of college. So most of those people who get rejected from other spheres, they come into the space. But there are very few hunters who want to do sales. And the moment you land up into some people like that, and I proudly tell that I'm one of those guys who chose sales as a career because I knew the most important skill set I have is the ability to engage, understand people, ask questions, be patient, and that will take me far. And then these creative aspects of doing things out of the box, just to ensure that your knowledge building about an attack before you make the attack is resoundingly creative. And creativity then percolates into obsession, like I said.
I love the fact that you focus so heavily there on the creativity of understanding the customer, because here's what we normally do. And we, being the bigger B2B industry, we take our normal commercial go to market process and say, that's how we're going to learn about our customers. The tremendous things that we can learn in the sales process, right? But as the sales team is being engaged later and later and later in the process, Gartner, everybody's been talking about that for years now. And you said yourself, they know what they want. A lot of time the sales process has become a validation process. They pick their short list, they know what they want to do. So what you're doing in pushing your team to be more creative is getting outside of that normal commercial go to market process that we have and learning. And you even said in our last conversation, you said that you use incentives and you use the AI tools themselves as incentives for the sales team to do the kinds of things that we've been talking about here. Tell me a little bit about how you use AI as an incentive inside of the sales department. I thought that was fascinating.
Not that I thought about it and implemented that. We are an investor driven company. Burn is important for us. As an AI company, we not using AI was is something that none of us in the leadership team were comfortable with. We were kind of twiddling our thumbs with the idea of security, governance, what could happen, what might go wrong. But eventually, when the CTO decided to experiment with our chosen platform for AI, he gave two of us in the leadership team, at least in North America, access. And I realized that the moment I connected that to my mailbox and my drive where all the data resides, I went with the assumption that the IT security team have done their part in securing everything. And there were very clear, tough not to do's. To do's were important, not to do's are very important, right? So do not put financial data there, do not put customer information there, do not put PI there. But ability to scrounge a mailbox to pick out a thread that has been going on for 6 months, correlating that to a QBR of somebody, that native institutional knowledge that a sales guy takes 6 months to know about his company and his product. And the institutional knowledge is very important. Most sales guys, by the time they have understood the institutional knowledge, their quotas have not been met, their throughput numbers are not there, obviously, then their output numbers are not coming. PIP, boom, out. Today, with the use of AI, personally, I realized that though I have an enablement team, which was giving me my collaterals, my battle cards, my agreements, contracts, bespoke agreements and contract proposals, because I know the business very well and I have now understood what the company can or cannot do, I'm able to use this AI tool as my whiteboard with conversational English to come out with world class output. So, for a new sales guy, this is creating that learning curve, like I mentioned, which typically could be 15, 30, it goes to 45, 60. So, time to business and time to productivity is faster. Because step back again, if you remember Addy's model, there is skill, then the circle of knowledge, and then the third intersecting circle of attitude. So visualize a Venn diagram. The first circle being skill, the second being attitude, the third being personality attributes. There is a common section between the three circles. You can call it the circle of the intersection of success. Right skills, right knowledge, and right personal attribute leads to success in a role. Very simple logic, right? You were actually making the circle of knowledge come to me much faster. And I don't have to mug it up and store it. I can reference it. So I really need to worry about skill building by leveraging upon my personality attributes and gaps that I know as a person. That's where AI kind of helped me a lot. It is adding scale, velocity to my already intelligent creative thought process. I'm able to produce, reproduce documentation, customer facing collateral very fast. And I saw myself being 5 times more productive. I'm good with numbers, but being good with numbers doesn't mean you're good with Excel sheets. V lookup, H lookup, pivot tables. Today, AI gives that to me immediately. So I become doubly more effective. Right? So I thought, why not curate this as a carrot and tell my sales team that you will have the basics that everybody has, but if you want to go one notch above and make 200% of your commission and OTE, this will come as an incentive, which will help you close faster, get more creative. So this gives you more time to do secondary research at scale, but spend more time talking to the customer. And we had some tremendous changes of perspectives. My best sales guys became better. My not so sales guys, because they were getting pushed more, started learning this better. So overall, the performance just lifted through. The immediate short-term blip that you see is in the throughput. Number of meetings, number of engagements go through the roof. Obviously, I sell enterprise and my sales cycles are sometimes 90 days going up to 18 months at times with larger fleets. So you can't quite not the deal velocity, but the time to get a pilot excited, the time to get a customer excited to get into a pilot with us kind of reduced quite a bit for us by using AI. So I thought, let's call it an incentive. The best sales guys will have this for a quarter. You continue to do well, you continue to use this very expensive AI tool, which is linked to the mother base or the hardware and the software base of the company, where knowledge assimilation becomes a referencing exercise. Early days, kind of giving me good throughput returns. There could be pitfalls of this. Sales guys are getting lazy, learning is not happening, but AI is here to live. Today, my son tells me that I don't need a driver's license because by the time I am 21, 18, I go out on the road. I don't think we will need drivers. Cars will drive themselves. So you got to weigh the pros and cons. But personally, in this role, the pros are outweighing the cons by at least 3 to 4 points.
You know, I love that analogy, by the way. I've used that a number of times too. Like none of our kids are gonna, or their kids, I have older kids, are gonna actually have a driver's license. How we use AI and how we use AI in the go to market, and you're using it as an incentive to use it correctly in combination with that kind of entrepreneurial mindset, that creativity to learn about the customer. The judgment of the human using the AI is equally as important. I know you've gotten all kinds of, you're preparing for a meeting on a plane and you're getting the download and you're creating the report that you're going to read. But I know that you're going back and you're asking questions too, right? Because you have certain things, you have knowledge in your head. This is my takeaway from our conversation. Having that entrepreneurial mindset, creatively having that customer obsession that you're always learning, and then using that creativity on AI to help bring it all together. But I would like to ask you, we've talked about so much. If there was one thing that you wanted the C suite audience that's going to be consuming this podcast to take away, what's the one thing that you want them to take away from our conversation?
I was hoping somebody will ask me this question at some point of time. My view of the world is as follows. In the days of the yore when the businesses are coming through, general manager finance was the most glamorous title for the finance guys. General manager sales used to be the most sought after title. And then the title part started delving into executive officers, financial officers, revenue officers. But CRO essentially is the culmination of a successful sales guy's end point. You can be a CRO and then only become a CEO. And most of us kind of remain a CRO for the rest of our lives. There is nowhere else to go from here. It's lonely at the top. Very few CROs, in fact, amongst all the C-level titles, a CRO typically is faster into the CEO, but not everybody becomes a CEO in their lives. Now, the reason I was saying this is as a first time CRO, what hit me was the need to learn the jargons, CAC, deal velocity, customer value. Absolute fun stuff to learn, absolutely fun stuff to use with investors. And I'm not saying that's trivial, it's very, very important for growth. But what happens is a successful, creative, passionate, obsession driven sales guy has become a CRO and then he's forgotten how to sell because he's sitting in boardrooms, looking at data, creating slides, creating stories to sell as to why his numbers have either not been met or they have been met and what next best can happen. The only thing you end up doing with your sales guys is if you can find time, you will review with them about their problems, or you will go and talk at events and share your experiences. The ability to find time and more importantly, have the will and the passion to go back to the drawing board and saying, I still love cold calling because I love to walk door to door and be told to get lost. In fact, I was doing this a few weeks back, Steve. My team put together a road show in Philadelphia, New Jersey. So they identified this entire, they had their mapping done. On this road, there are so many ports and there are so many trucking companies, so many bus companies. So they did all the scientific ways of essentially ensuring that we could cold call maximum number of prospects in a mini truck with our company's branding and designing. And the excitement I had for that one day that I could take out to be in the field with my reps, sitting in the truck, drying my sweat, and knocking door to door, just walking and doing what I was doing 20 years back was so much fun. It gave me so much creative satisfaction. We actually closed 2 deals there. Door to door knocking still works provided you have the passion and the bandwidth to do that. Now, I'm not saying make that the norm, but at the culmination of this journey, you got to balance out your MBA driven investor required, board required, metrics formulation, evaluation, and governance around the metrics with the passion that made you that guy. I think that's wherein the entrepreneurship versus management guy kind of peters it out. You learn new things to talk those jargons, those terminologies, look at the impact they have on business because that will help you make decisions. But don't stop doing what made you what you have become, which is being with the reps, doing those calls, rolling your sleeves, going and cracking deals. Because until unless you remain to be a player coach, you will just become another cog in the management team.
I love it. I wish we had another half hour or so because there's so much to go over here. But I have to tell you, I started this podcast, and the goal here is to talk to C suite executives all over the world that are doing B2B go to market strategies, learn from their experiences, their perspectives, their insights. If we all share with each other, it's like the rising tide that lifts all boats. And Sid, you were an amazing part of that rising tide today. I love talking to you. Your curiosity, your passion is infectious. So I just wanted to say thank you for coming on to the podcast today.
Thank you so much, Steve. In fact, if you remember the first time you sent me the email, I asked you, are you going to charge me for the podcast? And you said no. I just thought talking to somebody like you will be fun. I think you are doing this out of passion. Your resume speaks for itself. I saw at least 5 to 6 podcasts. You're not looking at how many views or how many likes you're getting at that. But if somebody takes that half an hour to actually open those 10 last podcasts and listen to the people talking, you are finding people who have the hunger to go and become the next Satya Nadella, who are aspiring to do that, but who have yet not reached there. And that ecosystem of people is much bigger than the Nadellas of the world itself. So there's a lot of learning about how to manage teams, how to look at your business, and grow as a professional, knocking at the doors of being a C-suite executive, perhaps wanting more challenges. I think that learning comes very well from this effort that you're putting up to these podcasts.